We have less than 2 months to go before the big conference to decide the future of life on this planet, if you like, because I mean, it really is supposed to deal with the climate issue, is heading for a complete impasse. It's a dead-end negotiation at the moment, and unless some very radical changes take place. Now, what is the macro set of issues? Of course, these are again, you know, the same normal things. You do this, and we will do that, and so on. But nobody's willing to make pledges that they intend to keep. So we can't expect very much. I think quite rightly, or certainly quite logically, the South, the poor people, the poor nations say that you caused all the problem, and your last 200 years of spewing out carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere means that you should be responsible for cleaning up. And besides, you've got more money, and besides, you created the kinds of infrastructure, the roads, the dams, the dikes, everything else, using that energy. So that energy enabled you to position yourselves to be actually pretty well protected. Even if there is climate change, you're going to be actually not too badly off. Everybody will be badly off, but the poor will be really badly off, because they are going to have hundreds of millions of people displaced from where they are. They're going to have huge you know, problems of extreme climate events, storms, drought, forest fires, floods, and they're going to have to pay the cost. So the argument goes that there's this historical responsibility. You've got the money, assets, as well as the money to pay for it, and you should get on with the job of reducing your carbon emissions. Now, the North has come to the conclusion that no matter what they do, even if they do cut down by the 80% that they have to cut down, if the poor countries, especially the big ones like Brazil and India and China and South Africa and places, continue to grow, then the problem won't have gone away. But their logic leaves something to be desired. Basically what they're saying is that if a country, any country, produces large quantities, then it has to cut down. It has to make a commitment to cut down. Now, this doesn't matter how big that country is. If that country is India or China, it's got to cut down. By the same token, if it's Switzerland, it doesn't have to cut down. You know, there seems to be somewhat of an inequity in that argument. You would think that Switzerland or Luxembourg or whatever are countries that are, you know, using quite a lot of energy in terms of human welfare, etc. But since they're small, they don't have to cut down. Big ones, no matter how little they're using, have to cut down. An average Indian housewife, 700 million of them, I'm not talking about the middle class, which is probably about 200 million people, but the other 1,000 million, 1 billion people, of whom half are women, all of whom virtually cook their meals with cow dung and twigs and whatever, have a per capita use of kerosene or fossil fuels of the order of maybe 50 kilograms a year. What are they going to cut down? What are we asking them to cut down? You know, I mean, it seems to me rather illogical to do this on the basis of countries. It's not countries, it's people. We go around the world, we talk about human rights, we talk about individual rights, because human rights have to be necessarily individual. On everything else, but on climate change, it's not allowed. And I think there is a major disconnect here. So I would say that when we go to Copenhagen, unless countries are willing to change their mindsets, right now the argument is boiled down to its basics, is the rich and the powerful are saying what's mine is mine and what's yours is up for grabs. That's what they're saying. And frankly, I don't think that's the basis of an agreement.
Probably in a very general term, I think to come to an understanding of the climate issue, and I think Dennis Meadows said once, It's basically not a problem, it's a symptom of not internalizing the costs of depletion of resources, also something that was reflected in Nick Stern's report, where he talked about one of the biggest market failures for good reason. I think it's just that we haven't observed any type of polluter pays principle. And as you mentioned before, the polluter pays principle has not to start with the least emitting, but with the top emitters. And probably, and I think that's an interesting aspect in the Swiss proposal for Copenhagen. So we all know from a Swiss small state that won't be the full solution, but having an allowance per capita first. So something like it's in the order of normally a ton per person, 2 tons per person, just putting one number down here, and then saying that's basically what you need to sustain a really sustainable lifestyle wherever you live. There might be differences, and the closer you get to the poles, the more you need for heating and so on. But basically saying that's the allowance, and on top of that, that's the thing you have to cap and trade to get it organized. You could also think about the global carbon tax. I don't think you get there, so probably cap and trade will be the mechanism. And by such a system, you would also then have, through the cap and trade, funds available to basically allocate through the adaptation fund to help those most exposed to some of the imminent changes they're really not responsible for. I mean, a large part of global society lives in coastal areas, but many of those have really not contributed to the CO2 stock we currently have in the atmosphere. So we certainly have to find solutions to better protect that part of a global society. As we all know, can't they be protected? They might really be endangered and their lifestyles, and there might be migration issues, which we'd also, just to not to threaten with that, but basically say they might come back on us from a side we don't want. So we are even well informed to rather try to support local lifestyles with a very local adaptation strategy, which has to be funded, I think, by the top emitters per capita, so to speak. As climate change might also come with a higher variability, so you also need to take into account that people can add their share by using different technologies in order to grow their crop. But there needs to be a risk transfer, as some of the variability they are not responsible for. So that should be kept by using the Global Adaptation Fund in order to provide them a cover against the extremes, means ensuring that extreme drought, which affects a whole region, that should be a place where some of the adaptation fund money should go into.